Hello my friends and welcome back. Today I want to talk about a video that is available on YouTube, and it's from Grayzone. It was posted today, March 15th, 2022, and it has three people over there. It has Max Blumenthal, it has Aaron Mate, and of course it has the star of the show, US retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Douglas Macgregor is nowadays, I would consider him a very, very courageous individual and a person who uses logic and objectivity and scientific method, if you want, and is now what he does is could be categorized as extraordinary, but in a normal society it would just be normal. And it's not that he says certain things that I might agree with, or I might support. And I'm not looking for the evidence necessary that he presents. I'm looking at the evidence he presents, and more importantly, the way he analyzes the evidence, the information. Because in a room of 10 people, we can provide the same evidence, facts, to all those 10 subjects. And because we have a different way of analyzing things, and we use subjectivity a lot, we might end up coming with 10 different outcomes, theories. And so it is, I think, a way, a correct way of analyzing things in order to reach the correct conclusion. And I think Colonel Macgregor does that, applies that method. What surprises me is that he's still allowed to talk, but I don't know for how long. So he talks in this show. He talks about the NATO situation, Ukrainian-Russian conflict, various tactical military interventions, and he uses history to make his points. And he's a very normal person, but by today's standards, he's a very courageous, fantastically deep person. So he talks about, for instance, he talks about the false flag operations that Western media, corporate media, is talking about, stating that they have evidence, and I'll always send you to Iraq war with the evidence that the US had, that Russia might stage a false flag operation and will use chemical weapons or whatever weapons they might be using. And Colonel Macgregor makes this point, which I think is very valid and logical and normal, that in his assessment, in his analysis, the Russians are winning, and the conflict, intervention in Ukraine. And then he says, why would they stage a false flag operation when they're winning? So if a false flag operation will, occur, develop, then who would that operation benefit? And that is the Ukrainians. Because if tomorrow we have a discharge of chemical weapons in Ukraine, if we say the Martians did it, the US corporate media would say the Russians did it, and that's bad. And so whoever would do that, this side of the Atlantic and the mass media from the Western countries will definitely say that the Russians did it, regardless if they will ignore and do whatever they want. So he says a false flag operation with chemical weapons will help Ukrainians. So the Russians will not do it. So if that occurs, then it was not the Russians, most likely. Now, the other point that he makes is regarding Victoria Nuland, who was in front of the Senate committee, and she was questioned by Florida Senator Marco Rubio. And when Victoria Nuland was asked about those laboratories, facilities funded by the United States government, in Ukraine for bio military weapons, she says she doesn't deny it. She said, yes, we funded it, but it's not important. They're not important. There's nothing. It's no big deal because there's nothing extraordinary being developed there. But in the same sentence, she says that what if those laboratories fall in the Russians' hands? And now logically, you would ask, well, if it's not important, why do we care? If it's important, we care. So if she says that they should not fall in the Russians' hands, that means it's important. Otherwise, who cares? So again, at a level of IQ 85, you would not ask that question. But above 85, you would ask the question, well, if it's not important, why do you care if it falls in the Russians' hands? But since Nuland doesn't answer Rubio's question for Rubio, she answers the questions for the 13-year-old public who's watching and is fed the script of mass media. Now, we have another, he talks about another situation, another incident. There were some training camps in Western Ukraine, some camps, military camps, facilities that were training so-called volunteers coming from the Western Hemisphere, I don't know, Western Europe, United States, to fight the Russians. And the Russian military spokesman said that those camps are considered targets and they will be targeted and hit. Now, the Russians did not, bombard or attack cities and, targets in the Western Ukraine, because they don't really have nothing to do with that. That's mostly Ukrainians, and according to Macgregor, which I think his assessment, his judgment is right, he says that Putin showed a lot of restraint in hitting civilian targets. And he says this is his mistake, the only mistake, that he acted and he acts with restraint in hitting other targets. His words were different. But coming back to the training facilities in the Western Ukraine, close to the border with Poland, the Russians, when they hit those facilities, they made 2 points, or maybe more, but 2 I was able to identify. One, we are capable of knowing where you guys are, and we are able to hit you. And the other message was towards Poland, that if Poland makes the wrong move, the Russians have the capability and the willingness to hit them. So if you want to get involved, just do something stupid, Poland. It was another article that I read that some 3 Eastern European countries sent their prime ministers in Ukraine. I think that's a provocation. I think it was Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland. They sent their prime ministers, I don't know, for whatever reasons, to get killed or something, I guess, in Ukraine. And now that's a provocation. And believe me, as a normal person, if those people are hit by a rocket, by a bullet, I don't want to hear anybody else saying, oh, the Russians did. They walked into the war zone, and that's the expectation. When you hear those Fox News, news people came and got killed or that and that, and everybody's crying, what did you expect? You didn't come to a ball, you didn't come to a wedding to dance and drink and fight at the end of the wedding. You came over there in a war zone. That's expected. And I don't think you guys are above the law. you're over there to talk and tell only one side of the story, I think you could be very easily considered as being, an enemy. I mean, why would I, if you would be objective and so on. But on the other hand, in the field, in a war zone, you don't know who's who, what's what. So people are desperate. People are, full of hatred, and they don't really care. Um, he talked about here, Colonel Macgregor talked about that when Poland and Romania accepted rocket sites on their territories, called rocket defense systems to counter the Iran ballistic weapons that are non-existent, that might hit Europe. The Russians pointed out that that's actually aimed at them, and it's not right. And Colonel Macgregor states that he, when he was in the part of the Trump administration, he spoke with the Pentagon and all those big shots over there, and he suggested that we should allow if these defense click sites and missile launching pads are just for defense and for Iran, why don't we let the Russian military, a few observers, to come and inspect them and convince themselves, if that's accurate, that they are just aimed at Iran? And since they are not aimed at Iran, the military thought that Colonel Macgregor lost his mind, because they all knew, including the Russians, that those sites were not aimed at Iran. Those were aimed at Russia. That's why they would not allow the Russians to come and look at them to do what? To verify and confirm that they are aimed at Russia. So it's another logical, connection and interpretation of facts. I mean, if you don't have anything to hide, why don't you let me in? Well, because it's Wednesday. Oh, okay. Then he says here, Colonel Macgregor, he concludes that the only mistake that Putin might have made is that he was too careful not killing the civilians, not targeting the civilians. There is no total war. Those are his words, and I think I agree with that. And he's trying to destroy the Nazi battalions, like Azov battalions, and some Ukrainian militaries in the eastern Ukraine. And this is his goal that he stated, and he sticks to the plan. We can read all kinds of statements made by irrational, childlike minds in U.S. administration and those experts who were wrong so many times, but somehow they're still, put in front of the cameras, and they will tell us what we are supposed to see. Like we can't understand things. We're retards. And you have all these people who tell you that Putin lost his mind, Putin is this, Putin is that, but they don't provide evidence, and say, okay, this is one evidence, second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. And out of this, I make the connection, logical connection, inference, and so on. And this is the conclusion. You don't make that. You just throw words, notions, terms, without backing them up. Or if the connection is made, it's so far-fetched that you say, okay, what's in between it, because it's too far. Well, you should believe that because I tell you so, and the government. Well, we know the government lies and always lied and will always lie. More or less, all governments lie. And another point that Colonel Macgregor makes in his video over there with those two gentlemen is that he claims that Biden is caught between the Uni Party, which is the Democrat, Republican, which are the same, as I always say, twins, but one has a mustache, that is the same, and behind they have the same parent who tells them what to do. So he said Biden is, besides other faults that he might have as an individual and so on, is caught by the interests and the parties who call him names if he's not doing this, if he's not doing that, then they call him all kind of names and call him weak and other things that I would, other names that I would probably agree with. But they try to shame him or dare him. I dare you do that, otherwise you are this and that and that. And the mass media is not on Biden's side, is on the military-industrial complex and globalist guys who try to actually kneel Russia, because Russia is out of line ideologically, military, and economically. It's too strong and doesn't follow the big clubs' orders. So this is what I want to talk about is Colonel Macgregor, and I think he's good to watch. It's not because he says extraordinary things, but because he might have some authority, behind his name and his positions, and whatever he says, he's using logic and common sense, and it doesn't seem to be leaning one way or the other. The problem is he's leaning away from the mainstream media and the people behind all this, and that means he doesn't fit the narrative. So then he rocks the boat for all of us, because he's gonna influence whatever we perceive as being the truth. He gives an alternate reality, alternate truth, and some people like you and I might look at that and say, okay, well, this guy's logical and makes sense, and distrust the mainstream media, which lies in general by default. Well, thank you very much for being with me today. Stay strong, stay smart. Always look for the truth, because without the truth, you can't make and dispense justice. So be a just person. See you later. Ciao.